Please welcome to the stage Representative Sarah McBride.
Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for coming out on this Saturday before Thanksgiving for this afternoon's conversation. I am so grateful to be here at Old Town Hall in Wilmington with the Delaware Historical Society. I'm so grateful to be here with Majority Democrats, an organization that I am so proud to be a part of alongside 31 other elected officials at the federal, state, and local level. Elected officials around the country who are working to build a supermajority to win everywhere and to deliver for everyone. And most importantly, I'm grateful to be here with all of you. When I was running for this position in 2024, I said that my campaign was a conversation with Delawareans. And today we are continuing that conversation. I also said when I was running that if elected, I would work with anyone who was willing to work with me to deliver for Delaware, but I would stand up to anyone in order to defend Delaware. And over the last 11 months, I have had the professional privilege of a lifetime in serving what is objectively, we all know, the greatest state in the history of the Union in Congress. And despite the dysfunction and the toxicity and chaos in Washington, I'm proud to say that I've been able to break through the gridlock and work with people across the aisle to deliver for our state. That's why I was the first freshman to introduce legislation this Congress, bipartisan legislation, protecting consumers, Delawareans who've been struggling with debt from predatory practices. Over the last 11 months, I'm proud to have introduced more bipartisan legislation than any other freshman on issues ranging from protecting our farmers and lowering the cost of groceries for consumers, bills to expand family leave for workers across this country, legislation to uphold our values internationally and support small businesses here at home. With individual Delawareans, our office has been able to bring back nearly $4 million owed to constituents from the federal government in the form of veterans benefits, tax refunds, and Social Security checks. Working with our congressional delegation, we've been able to secure millions of dollars in new investments to Delaware to bring good-paying jobs to our state, to build affordable housing, and to improve services for some of our most vulnerable neighbors. And when the Trump administration announced that they were going to cut funding for a program that supports small and medium-sized manufacturing businesses here in Delaware and across the country, I led an effort in Congress that got the administration to reverse course, protecting a program that has fostered hundreds of jobs in this state and tens of millions of dollars in economic activity. We've been able to get things done. We've been able to get things done. But I don't have to tell you all that the last 11 months have also required a lot of defense. I have entered a very different Congress and a very different Washington than the one I hoped to enter. And I have had a front row seat to the cruelty, to the chaos, and to the corruption of this administration. The lawlessness, the recklessness, the broken promises time and time again from this president. He ran and won the last election promising Americans that he would focus on lowering the cost of living for this country. But since taking office, essentially every single one of his actions and priorities have betrayed that promise. Time and time again, it has been promises made and promises broken. Because of his reckless and chaotic tariff policies, prices on nearly everything have gone up. Groceries, my favorite item, coffee. The cost of housing. Essentially, everything is more expensive because of this president. And this coming Black Friday, the prices that you will see are going to look like just normal prices every other year because of the Trump tariff tax. And then, of course, across this country, Americans are already seeing skyrocketing costs when it comes to affording health care. Over the course of the last several months, Donald Trump and Republicans in Congress have inserted a $1 trillion ticking time bomb into the center of the American healthcare system. And it is now going off. Right now, tens of thousands of Delawareans are logging onto healthcare.gov, and they are seeing their premiums increase 100, 200, 300%. A family of 4 in Middletown could pay $10,000 more in premiums because congressional Republicans are hell-bent on cutting people's health care. Indeed, the only thing that congressional Republicans seem more loyal to than Donald Trump is cutting the health care of the American people. That is what they have spent the last 11 months doing. Because of the expiration of the Affordable Care Act tax credits, millions will see their premiums increase. But it doesn't stop there. We have the largest cut to Medicaid in American history on the horizon. 15 million Americans will lose coverage when those cuts go into effect. Tens of thousands of people will lose their lives in preventable deaths because of these cuts to health care. But what happens when you take 15 million people and trash their health coverage? It's not that they never get care. It's that they get care when they're sicker, and the care is more expensive. They go to the emergency room, and that care has to be paid for. And so who pays for it if you're uncovered? Everyone else. And that's what these cuts mean for those who don't lose their coverage. And for these cash-strapped healthcare clinics and doctors' offices and hospitals in rural communities, when you remove $1 trillion from the American healthcare system, what do you think happens to them? They cut services and in some cases will have to close their doors, leaving everyone who relies on those healthcare facilities having to drive longer, having to take more time off work, having to wait longer to get care. Donald Trump loves to own things and stick his name onto them. Well, he now owns the American healthcare system. It is Trump Care. And what does Trump Care mean? Tens of millions of people losing coverage and everyone else having to pay more and wait longer to get care. I ran for office because of my experience as a caregiver to my husband Andy during his battle with cancer. I ran for office because I do not believe in the wealthiest, most developed nation on earth that the ability to get the care that you need to live and thrive should be a matter of luck. I believe it should be the law of the land. And so long as you provide me the privilege of representing you in Congress, yesterday, today, tomorrow, next week, next year, for however long I have air in my lungs and breath in my body, I will fight to guarantee affordable, quality health care for every single person in this country. We often hear that the cruelty is the point, but it's even more than that. This cruelty that they're inflicting on the American people, it is the currency of their corruption. Because in the last election, Donald Trump created an unholy alliance with billionaire donors. He said, "You fund my campaign and facilitate my consolidation of power, and I will pay you off with massive tax breaks." That's what they did with that big, ugly bill. But in order to just partially pay for those tax cuts, they used the health care and food assistance for the American people as a piggy bank to line the pockets of the uber wealthy. And what little time that they have left, not cutting the health care of the American people, not raising prices on groceries and housing, what little time they have left, Donald Trump is spending on bathrooms and ballrooms. He's spending what little time left renovating the White House bathroom off the Lincoln bedroom. He's spending what little time he has left gilding the Oval Office and destroying the East Wing. And he's spending what little time left fomenting culture wars, trying to pick on the least powerful in our society in order to divide us and misdirect our attention from what the powerful are currently doing. That is a strategy as old as politics itself. But I'm also here not just to sound the alarm, but to share with you something that I have learned over the last several years serving in the Delaware State Senate, running for Congress, and now having the privilege every single day that I am back here in Delaware and not in Washington, D.C., and if you see a picture of me, you know I'm here because I have a huge smile on my face. I spend whatever time I have here traveling up and down Delaware, going to red areas and blue areas and purple areas, talking to Delawareans who are Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. And I have good news to share with you all. And that is we are not as divided as the algorithms make it seem. I know right now, when you turn on cable news, when you open your social media, it can feel like not only is politics so toxic that it can no longer deliver for people, but that we are so divided as a people that politics and persuasion is pointless. That we are therefore in an existential battle for this country, not just against politicians who want to undermine our freedom and our economic security, but also an existential struggle with one another. And I can tell you that it doesn't have to be that way, and it is not that way. We can tap people's better angels if we allow ourselves to see them. If we allow ourselves to be in proximity with people who, yes, agree with us, but also people who disagree with us. I am here to tell you that most people are good and decent people. And yes, we have real disagreements. But as someone who gets to travel across the state and talk to people who disagree with me on politics, about politics, regardless of how they voted in the last election, I have seen that we have far more in common than what social media and our politics leads us to believe. It is still possible to build a supermajority in this country of people across geography and across ideology in defense of our country, our values, our freedoms, and in defense of working people. It is possible to build that coalition. That's why I am so proud to be part of this organization. Because it understands that if everything is truly on the line, then we need all the help that we can get. If everything is truly on the line in this moment, which I believe it is, then I have a message to anyone across the state and around this country. And that is, if you believe working people need a fair deal and you believe freedom is good, then welcome to our cause. Welcome to our coalition. It is possible because what I have seen over the last year since getting elected is that the real divide in our country and our politics is not so much Republican and Democrat, liberal or conservative. It's between builders and destroyers. Destroyers, they succeed in a culture of cynicism. They exploit it for their own game. They want to destroy our government and sell it for parts. They want to destroy our attention span and mine what little remains for advertising dollars. They want to destroy housing and healthcare so that they can consolidate power by doling out the scraps. They want to destroy jobs and the American worker by unleashing unregulated technology that leaves the rich richer and everyone else poorer. They want to destroy our sense of confidence so we give up on change, and they want to destroy our sense of commonality so we give up on one another. I get it. I get it. Things are not working. Too many people are being left behind in this moment. But those destroyers, they want to destroy everything but their own wealth and power so that when everything else is destroyed, they can go raid America's estate sale for themselves. We can destroy in this moment. Or we can do the harder thing, and that is to build. We can build an America where everyone knows that they belong, where everyone has a fair shake. We can build the homes of the future so that home ownership is within reach for people. We can build the healthcare system that truly delivers quality healthcare to every single person who needs it. We can be truly pro-family by building a cradle-through-career support system with paid family and medical leave nationwide and universal childcare and strong public schools so that it becomes affordable once again to actually start a family. We can build an economy for the future that protects workers and guarantees that the new prosperity unleashed by new technologies is shared by the many and not the few. It is easy to destroy. It is a lot harder to build, but it is worth it. And as we enter 2026, many of you know that we'll be celebrating the 250th anniversary of the founding of this country. A moment where people put their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on the line to build a new kind of government, of the people, by the people, and for the people. And the greatness of our country lies in the fact that every single successive generation has met the moment to build new policies, to build new structures, to build new institutions, to meet the needs of the people, to deepen our sense of freedom, to expand opportunity to those who have too long been cast to the shadows and the margins of society. That is the greatness of this country, and that is the story of this country. We're here in a space that is almost as old as the Republic itself. And every single day that I enter the floor of the United States House of Representatives as your member of Congress, I think about all of the history that has occurred within that space. The history that is heavy in the air. Because when you enter that space, you realize that that is the chamber that Congress moved in 1857, just before the Civil War. That is the place where they passed the 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment to abolish slavery and guarantee equal protection to all Americans. That is the space where they built Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. The chairs we sit in are the chairs that my predecessors sat in to pass the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. And when you step into the shoes of those previous generations who faced similar questions, similar odds, and quite frankly, odds much greater than the ones we're facing now, and you realize that they had every reason to give up hope. They could not see the light at the end of the tunnel. But they imagined something better. They persevered, they summoned their hope, they found the light, they built something new, and they changed the world. And I have to believe that with all of our freedoms at our disposal and all of the new technologies, all of the support that we have in this moment that they dreamed of and fought for and delivered. Yes, those are under attack. Yes, progress is 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and we may be in a step back. But I have to believe that if we summon even a fraction of the hope and courage and imagination of those generations, then we can turn this moment into what a friend of mine from Florida called a slingshot moment, where yes, we are pulled backwards, but the tension and pressure of being pulled backwards ultimately propels us to destinations that we've not yet been. So thank you all very much. It's an honor to be with you today, and I look forward to answering whatever questions you have. Don't be shy. Hold on, we've got a mic for you.
Thanks for being here for us. We appreciate you. What, with all that's going on the attacks on the Department of Education, what can you, as a member of Congress, promise us or give us as something to look forward to in the area of hope?
As I mentioned before, this administration is trying to dismantle government. They're trying to prove that government can't work by making it not work. And across federal agencies, they are trying to decimate them in pursuit of that goal. And ultimately, like I said, to try to sell those departments for parts to the highest bidder, or in some cases, the lowest bidder who's just sucked up to the president most recently. About 50 years ago, in the aftermath of the Civil Rights Act, with the shadow of Brown versus Board, our federal government decided that we needed an agency that was dedicated to protecting the rights of students and educators across every background, across every race, in every corner of this country. We decided that we were going to have a department that was going to be dedicated to helping states grapple with the costs of educating children, especially children with disabilities. That's why the Department of Education was created, to protect the rights of students and educators and to guarantee that our schools have the resources that they need. I do not believe that we will better protect the rights of students or guarantee that our educators have the resources that they need to educate all students regardless of background or ability by dismantling the department that for 50 years has been dedicated to that mission. I've joined with my colleagues in opposition to the administration's actions. Many of these actions, I believe, are illegal. And working with our attorneys general, and I gotta say, Kathy Jennings here in Delaware has done an amazing job standing up and taking this administration to court. Working with my colleagues and attorneys general to push back on this administration's illegal dismantling of not only the Department of Education, but we're seeing it with the Department of Housing and Urban Development. The department that is going to see the most significant cut next to the State Department is HUD. I don't know how we're gonna build affordable housing if we're defunding by 50% the department that helps to foster what limited affordable housing we already have. But if they wanna dismantle these departments, they have to come to Congress. And we are not going to let them. It's also why we need to make sure we have a majority in the next Congress so that we have all of the levers at our disposal to push back against this administration and truly hold them accountable. I hear a lot about people loving the way some of the blue state governors are pushing back. If you want congressional Democrats to be able to push back in the same way that blue state governors have pushed back, then we need a majority in Congress. And I believe we're going to get there. I think the election results 2 weeks ago show that the public sees what's going on and they don't like it. They want a federal government that is solving problems, not creating more problems. They want a federal government that's lowering costs rather than increasing them. And yes, they want a federal government that is a partner to the states and local districts in building a public education system in every zip code that serves and meets the needs of every child. And I will continue to fight for that majority. I will continue to fight for the Department of Education, the funding and the protections that it provides, and against this illegal effort by the administration to dismantle it. So thank you. Start over here, and then we'll come back over here.
Continuing with the Department of Education, the announcement yesterday from Linda McMahon that she's eliminating the status of professional from so many classes of professionals.
Yeah.
There's a 30-day comment period What else can we do to get that reversed?
Well, I saw this yesterday. Obviously, I encourage people to submit comments. They should hear from the American people. Those records are important. I anticipate that there will be court challenges to that effort. And this is part of an effort that they have been doing across the federal government since the day they got into office, which is to strip the civil service protections for public servants, to leave them vulnerable to mass firings so that they can put in place their own cronies in those positions or just eliminate the positions entirely. And people have to understand what happens when these federal positions that are meant to serve the public good are either eliminated or turn into political patronage positions. And that is, people get left behind and they become tools for corruption. You know, when we talk about Project 2025 and the rollback of the clock on our progress as a country, I think the closest analogy that we have in American history to this moment is the Reconstruction period. It's the Gilded Age. It's a time of significant cultural regression, a moment where the federal government was overrun with corruption through the spoils system, a period of time when new technologies were revolutionizing the economy, but in a way that sacrificed the well-being, the economic security, the safety, the health of workers, while making the rich very rich, increasing the economic divide. And this is part of that. This gutting of the federal workforce and protections is part of that effort. And they're doing it in the Department of Education, but they're doing it elsewhere. And while we've certainly got to push back in the courts, while we have to sound the alarm so people understand and connect the dots when this happens, this isn't some abstract bureaucracy. This is the power of the federal government that they are illegally seizing to increase their power and to line the pockets of the wealthy. We need to make that case to the American people, but like I said before, we've got to get a majority in 2026. The reality is, on all of these things, there is no easy lever. There is no easy button. The greatest lever that we have at our disposal in this moment is public opinion. Yes, we have an opportunity to push back on some of the worst excesses in the courts. Yes, as we've seen in Congress, there are instances with these slim majorities where we can maybe convince 1, 2, or 3 Republicans to stand up to this administration and demand some kind of transparency and accountability, but it's fleeting. It's all too rare. The reality is, in this moment, there's not going to be some politician or some group that comes in and saves everything. We are the ones that are going to have to fight back with our voices, with our votes, protests and marches, because that is the only way to truly stop an authoritarian wannabe. That is the only way in this moment that we can effectively pull the emergency brake on this administration. And I know that that's not always comforting, that there's not a lever for us to pull or an easy button in every instance. There is going to be real harm in this moment. We aren't going to be able to stop every bit of harm, but we can do all we can to mitigate it. We can fight like hell to stop it, and we can do the hard work of building that coalition we are going to need, because it can't just be places like Delaware and New York and California where we win. We are going to have to win in rural areas. We're going to have to win in places like Nebraska. We're going to have to win in states like North Dakota and Texas and Florida if we are going to have the majority in the House and the Senate that we need to not only push back on this administration, hold it accountable, pass good things and dare them to veto it, but then hopefully come 2029, when we have a Democratic president in the White House, to actually deliver for people. Because I believe in this moment that so much of Trumpism is fueled by a crisis of hope. it's fueled by people giving up on government as a force for good. Politics as a means for progress. Because when you give up on government as a force for good and politics as a means for progress, it leaves people angry. And for some of those people who are angry, they become hopeless. They opt out of the system entirely. And others, they grow angry, and a strong man comes in and says, I alone can fix it. I can consolidate power and do all that you want. If we are going to inoculate this country to Trumpism, we are going to actually have to deliver. And in this system of government, that means winning everywhere. That means all of us being willing to have conversations with people who agree with us and people who disagree with us. And so what I would say on all of these questions, on all of these specific questions, there's not going to be a simple answer. There's not going to be a straightforward answer, but the strategy is the same in this moment. And that is, all of us have to have the courage not just to preach to our choir, but to grow our congregation, to actually engage with people who didn't vote the same way that we did in the last election. And the good news is that power is in our hands, and we can exercise that courage if we're willing to do so. So thank you. Over here.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. I am a big supporter of you, and I appreciate you being here. And I also read every day Heather Koch Richardson. She is a historian, but also she recaptures everything that's going on in Washington, breaks it down to where I can understand it. It's just very informative, and I believe it is real news. Anyways, it was reported, this is about our president. He is going to, and he made a deal with the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed Salman, to sell fighter jets, the F-35s, okay? So he made a deal, and our past presidents, to my understanding, refused to do this because of the intel that is on these planes that could be leased to other countries, that China, for example, that we don't want them to have. And also, he talked about having a TAR Air Force facility in Idaho. Are these true? And this is in Idaho. This is in the middle of the United States. To bring these in the middle of our country, how does that hurt our defense and our intel? And does he have the power to do that? It doesn't have to go through Congress to do these.
So
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. And the powers of the commander-in-chief are pretty wide in terms of the United States military and particular sales, although there are opportunities for Congress to do resolutions of disapproval to try to stop sales. And evaluating any kind of sale and learning more about the one that you've just brought up with Saudi Arabia, it's important for Congress to do its due diligence. I would like to see the Armed Services Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee, which I'm on in the House, hold hearings on this topic to understand exactly what are the parameters of this deal and what are the risks to our national security. Because one of the things that I think has been abundantly clear for this entire administration is that they're not particularly careful when it comes to intelligence and national security. We are all very aware of Signalgate. I mean, we have perhaps the most unqualified in every way person leading the Department of Defense right now in this moment. I'm glad this administration is so passionate about honoring that chosen name that they have decided to use for the department. But time and time again, we have deeply unserious people in positions of deep consequence, of serious consequence. People who have demonstrated that they put their own interests, in the case of this president and his family, their own convenience in the case of texting state secrets on Signal, all ahead of the national interests and our national security. That certainly doesn't sound America first to me. And this is precisely the kind of role that Congress should take. So one of the things that we get when we are members of Congress is we get security briefings. on major issues. These are top secret, and it is often the committee of jurisdiction that asks for it. Unfortunately, because Republicans in Congress are in the chairs of those relevant committees, they rarely ask for full, unvarnished briefings for us. It's the power of the majority. And this administration has stonewalled every step of the way, whether it's the terrible intelligence decisions that they have made individually, or for that matter, the arguably illegal and certainly reckless decisions to bomb boats, these extrajudicial killings that we are seeing. They have stonewalled congressional oversight every step of the way, and Republicans in Congress have been all too eager to bend over for this president. And, you know, as we celebrate 250 years of this country, when the founders drafted the Constitution, we hear this term co-equal branches of government. Jamie Raskin, is a colleague of mine, would yell at me for saying that word because he says co-equal is not actually a word. We're actually not equal branches of government. There is a reason why Congress is listed in Article 1. It is the preeminent branch of Congress. And 250 years in, we are seeing an effort by this administration to consolidate power in the executive and to render Congress essentially useless, to create what they have in Russia with the Duma, a rubber stamp institution. And one of the most important oversight responsibilities that Congress has is in the context of national security and intelligence. And I believe that has to be at the top of our agenda when we win power in 2026, because lives are quite literally on the line. So thank you. Right here.
The Trump administration has decided to open up great areas of Alaska, the Pacific, the Gulf of whatever they want to call it, and I don't even know about the East Coast, a part of Florida, into more oil and gas drilling, while solar becomes the greatest, cheapest energy source now in the planet, and China is building enough solar every day to equal about 3 coal-fired plants. Can we do something, about that, but also about there are certain regulations and rules which probably inhibit solar development in this country? I would think that if you say something is, oh, we're going to reduce regulations, you might find partners on the other side for that idea. I don't know about tariffs as well on solar panels coming into this country because we're not the major producer. So if we think about reducing regulations in order to responsibly grow solar, is there a move there?
So first of all, on the first part of your question, when I was a state senator, the oath of office that we take prescribed by the state constitution is to protect the rights of future generations to share the rich, natural, and historic heritage of Delaware. And while that is not part of the federal constitution's oath of office, it's one that I feel very deeply. That we have a responsibility as elected officials to be stewards of our land, stewards of our air, stewards of our water, stewards of this planet, because it's the only one we have. And this administration, time and time again, has sought to exploit the natural resources of this country, not to the benefit of the many, but to the benefit of the few. And that's what we're seeing right now. Because if this administration, to your point, was actually interested in lowering the cost of energy, they would have a truly all-of-the-above energy approach that invests in wind and solar and other forms of new technologies and new energy sources that we know other countries right now are investing in, rightfully so. And I find this to be one of the best examples of the hypocrisy of this administration. Because not only are they stopping the production of renewable energy sources that do have the potential to increase our energy supply and lower costs for Americans, Not only are they stopping new ones, in many cases they're trying to stop ones that are already in construction, that are already unfolding. Why is that? It's because they are doing the bidding of their donors in the oil and gas industry who don't want to see renewable energy, even if it is at the expense of the American people and our energy bills. To your point around reducing regulation, there should be, and I think there is, bipartisan opportunities to reduce those regulations to guarantee that we are producing the green jobs of the future with green projects that not only pay great wages, but also help to reduce the cost of energy for Americans across this country. I think whether it's energy or housing, there is an opportunity to forge a bipartisan path forward in building, in both of those areas, what this country needs to bring down what I think are some of the most burdensome costs that people are facing, people's energy bills right now, and of course the cost of housing. I will also add that I know at the local level in Delaware, there's a big debate going on right now about data centers. And we know that these are facilities talking about sort of scraping the natural resources of an area that will jack up the cost of electricity for people around them, and also in many cases take so much water that people don't have much left. And one of the provisions that I was really proud to pass a couple of months ago unanimously through the House of Representatives is a provision that will result in millions of dollars of new investment here in Delaware with a Delaware-based employer who's forging innovative technologies and research that will dramatically reduce the need of these data centers for water and electricity to operate. Because to the degree that these data centers are going to be a reality, we need to make sure, one, that we're protecting local communities, but two, guaranteeing that when they operate, they aren't putting the strain on the water supply and the grid that those facilities currently are putting on them. And so I'm proud that this provision passed. I'm going to continue to work it to make sure that it gets through and gets to the president's desk where it would be signed in a larger bill. But that part is also very much on my mind, that we've got to grapple with the data center issue as well as making sure we've got more supply of renewable energy. So thank you. Yes, in the back.
Yeah, hi. My name's Sam. I live here in Wilmington. I saw an interview recently that former Vice President Harris gave. And she was talking about the political divide in this country and all the difficulty around that. And she said something to the effect that we're not working from the same information.
Yeah.
And this is something that I think about a lot because I really think that algorithmic media is something that is accelerating the divide and pushing people further and further away from each other. What would you say to the idea of proposing either legislation or potentially eventually a constitutional amendment to the effect that no public disseminator of information, whether it's a media company or a social media platform or even a government agency, can throttle or tailor or promote or in any way target information in the public space on the basis of who is receiving it? Other than, with perhaps a carve out for, adult content to minors and things like that. But basically, establishing the principle that in the public marketplace of ideas, anyone can say anything so long as they say it to everyone equally. And if not that, what would your proposed solution be to this information silo problem?
So I think it's a great question, and it's one that's very much top of mind, and I sort of alluded to it in my opening comments. Because the information divide that we exist in is fundamentally unsustainable for a democracy, right? You have essentially two sets of facts. Honestly, at this point, we've got different sets of facts for every single person in this country. And to the degree that it generally falls within two camps, you've got two teams on the field. One team is playing football and one team is playing baseball. They're going to run into each other. They're going to hit one another. That's not going to work. We're going to get hurt. And that's the reality that social media has forged. It's also it's also given us not only a media, an information environment that is inaccurate and untruthful, but it's also given us this false perception of who we are as a country. Because if you use social media, you probably fall into two camps. You're either a doom poster or a doom scroller. The doom posters probably amount to like 10% of the people online, but it's 100% of the content that we're seeing. It's the loudest, it's the most extreme, it's the most outrageous. And so it gives all of us this false perception about what Americans think and believe. It gives us this false perception that everyone is either super far left or super far right, and that therefore there's no point to conversation, because we're so divided that we could not possibly convince one another or hear one another. And to what I was saying before, one of the joys of being in this office is I get to get offline and actually talk to people in real life, and I get to talk to them about politics. And you realize that while social media can impact real life, it's not representative of it. And at this moment, that false perception of who we are, it's driven by both the algorithms as designed and manipulated by those that control them, and, I will say, manipulated by foreign adversaries who want to turn us against one another. 80 years ago, the greatest generation was called to defeat tyranny by putting their lives on the line on two continents in defense of our country and in defense of our values. Our generation's basically being asked right now just to not fall prey to the manipulation that we are experiencing by powerful people who control the social media platforms and foreign adversaries who are manipulating them to turn us against one another, to deepen the divides in this country, to have us give up on each other. And our call in this moment is a lot less sacrifice than putting our lives on the line. It's quite literally just touching grass. It's having conversations with one another in real life, offline, about things that matter. I know that's uncomfortable, but we've got to do it. But to your point, it's not just a cultural solution to this, because these platforms are of a power that we have never seen before in our politics. And the algorithm can be manipulated by those in positions of power, right? I mean, we've seen it in real time on Twitter, now X. And I think that it demands government regulation, because this is a product that we are using. At a minimum, we should understand what we're using. At a minimum, there should be requirements around transparency. We can protect trade secrets, we can protect the individual companies, but we have to have transparency so that we understand what we are actually engaging with, at a minimum. Two, I think we have to recognize that these platforms are addictive, these platforms are dangerous, and if adults want to use them, fine, but we've got to figure out how to make sure that formative young minds are not being destroyed because they live on social media. At a minimum, that means getting phones out of schools. And but to your particular suggestion, I'm open. I am a strong believer in free speech. And I think what you're calling for is an environment where there is truly free speech, not a situation where one individual or a handful of individuals get to decide on the platforms that all of us live on and many of us get our news on, that they don't get to decide exactly what we're going to see and delude us into thinking that that's organic. And so I'm open to different changes. I want to make sure that, I mean, you mentioned a constitutional amendment. Candidly, I'm not sure that that's a realistic possibility, but if there are regulations that fall within the parameters of existing constitutional rights, I am all ears and I am eager to pursue a path that actually regulates both social media and AI, because we can't stick our head in the sand. We can't pretend like these aren't here, that these aren't having an impact. We can't pretend like AI won't come here. It's here. And this is part of what we have to build in this moment. An economy of the future that regulates the industries that are now impacting every single part of our lives. We've had instances, I'm going to go on a tangent here with AI, we've had instances where new technologies have disrupted individual industries, where they've made industries need fewer jobs, or they've made specific jobs obsolete entirely, right? In the early 20th century, the job of an elevator operator was skyrocketing. And then in the second half of the 20th century, people felt maybe a little bit more comfortable pressing buttons in the elevator themselves, and the need for those elevator operators declined. This is the first time where we're going to see a new technology that transcends every industry and every sector, that transcends not only our economy, but also our relationships with one another. And if we don't wake up to all that is coming, not only understand it, but regulate it, well, I think we're going to find ourselves in 20 or 30 years really regretting that we didn't meet the moment and pass the necessary policies. So thank you. We've got time for one more question. Okay. Maybe two more questions. Steve, I saw.
Hi, Congresswoman. You've talked about today, every podcast you're ever on, you talk about talking with people from the other side. Has there been issues that you felt there would be no support on, that you thought would be the hardest things, and then you found that support on the other side of the aisle?
That's a great question. I'm gonna answer in three parts. Two will be examples from the Delaware State Senate, and one will be Congress, because I recognize Congress is very different than the Delaware State Senate, and I don't want to pretend like the Delaware State Senate's a perfect analog for the United States House of Representatives. I wish it were. But you know, when I got elected to the Delaware State Senate to represent the 1st Senate District, I ran that campaign saying, my priority is going to be passing paid family and medical leave. And I had a lot of people, including a lot of Democrats, say, good luck with that. That's never going to happen. Delaware's too cautious. Delaware doesn't do that kind of stuff. And if you do get it done, it'll take a decade or more. And I decided that I was not going to take no or wait as an answer. I wrote a bill, I introduced a bill, and I traveled all over this state. I met with everyone, people who agreed with my bill, people who were open to it but had concerns, and people who thought that it would be the end of our society. And I know that often one of the easiest ways to say no to progress is to complain about process. Right? People don't want to have to argue on the merits of a policy, frankly, a policy like paid leave that's supported by almost 90% of Delawareans and Americans, that every other industrialized nation has. And I thought, I'm not going to give them an opportunity to complain about process. I'm going to go everywhere and talk to everyone. And in some cases, I talked to people and they gave me some good ideas, and we incorporated them. In other instances, I talked to people and maybe I didn't love their ideas, but I thought, you know what? This is an important coalition partner that we can bring on and maybe increase the chance of passage, so I'll compromise. In other instances, we were at an impasse. We disagreed agreeably. But the folks who disagreed with me still disagreed with me, but they understood that I had heard and considered their concerns. And because of that process, because I simply showed up and listened to people, my values call on me to affirm the dignity of every person, to respect every person. The simplest way to do that, the foundational way of doing that, is just showing up and listening. Because of that, we were able to amass a coalition in support of that bill, the largest expansion of the social safety net in modern state history, that ranged from the AFL-CIO to the State Chamber of Commerce. And we were able to pass it with bipartisan support, not in 10 years, not in 5 years, but in one single year. And in January of this coming year, Delaware workers across the state will finally have paid family and medical leave. Second example. I have been very thoughtful about when I lean in on issues that many people expect me to solely focus on. I'm proud of who I am, but I'm working on all of the issues that matter, including equality for my LGBTQ constituents. But when I was in the state Senate in June of 2023, I was the prime sponsor in the state Senate of a bill that banned the LGBTQ panic defense in our state. And for those of you who aren't familiar, this is basically a defense that's been used in states across this country that says that a perpetrator's violence against an LGBTQ person is understandable and less deserving of consequence because the person who committed the violence, when they realized the person in front of them was LGBTQ, was essentially driven to a temporary state of insanity. And this is a defense that's been used successfully and unsuccessfully in state courts across the country and courts around the world. Some cases people get off, some cases people get reduced sentences for that violence against an LGBTQ person. And a number of states had passed bills banning it in their state courts, and Delaware was considering a similar bill. It had passed the state house on fairly partisan lines, and it was coming over to us in the state Senate. And I had just a couple of days before announced my campaign for Congress. And as folks might be able to expect, that received a lot of feedback. A lot of it was very positive, but some of it not so positive. And because of that not so positive feedback, we had to have what we usually don't have on the floor of the state Senate, which is we had to have police on the floor. And with that police presence visible, with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle understanding why it was there, I stood up. I explained why this bill was important to me and to my constituents, and I paused. And I waited for my Republican colleagues to stand up and to say, at best, this is a solution in search of a problem, and at worst, that this is understandable, if not justifiable, violence. And that's not what they said. Because to a person, every single Republican in that chamber on that day, with that police presence right behind them, they stood up. They not only affirmed the dignity of LGBTQ lives, they not only validated the fear that many LGBTQ people live with every single day. They not only declared that they would vote for that bill, but for perhaps the first time ever in this country's history, every single Republican in a legislative chamber stood up and asked to be added as co-sponsors to that bill. And look, saying that there's no excuse for violence against anyone in our society is a pretty low bar. It's like quite literally the bare minimum. But what happened in that moment was so much more profound than the policy, because what happened in that moment is that my colleagues, who I had gotten to know, who I had worked with on a whole host of bills, they realized in that moment that the political is fundamentally personal. That the issue that we were debating was about real people, who they know and they care about and they respect. And you can't undo that synaptic connection once it occurs. You can't undo that connection between policy and people once it exists. And it's how so much change in this country has been forged. Through quiet, small, almost invisible moments of recognition. Of hearts changing just a little, of minds changing just a little. But heart by heart, mind by mind, issue by issue, we have rendered prejudices of the past to be considered unjust, like they should be. We've built a civil rights system in this country that allows people to participate in our society, to vote, to go to a restaurant, to go to school. Yes, it is under attack. But with public opinion, if we change hearts and minds, nothing is impossible, and certainly without it, nothing is sustainable. And then the final example that I'll give from Congress is I mentioned I've introduced a lot of bills this Congress. Essentially, all of them are bipartisan. There were a lot of people when I got into Congress who are professional provocateurs who wanted to use my service as a really pitiful and obvious attempt to get attention for themselves. They were trying to use me as a political pawn in order to do that, and I just refused to be used as a political pawn and didn't take their bait. And not only have those folks, for the most part, moved on to easier highs to get attention, but I actually had a number of colleagues, and I won't say their names, but I had a number of colleagues on the other side of the aisle who came up to me, who not only came up to me to apologize for how a handful of people were welcoming me to Congress, but to say, let's find opportunities to work together to show people that not everyone is like that. And while I won't name those names, like I said, I've been able to introduce more bipartisan bills than any other freshman. And in part, it's been a byproduct of the fact that those professional provocateurs came after me. So serves them right, bless their hearts. I'm gonna continue to make lemonade out of lemons. All right, one more question. Right here, yeah. Oh, my good friend.
Hey, Sarah, I'd like to bring it back to affordability.
Yeah.
And this would be kind of a good ending question, I think. I want to talk about the sort of the intersection between affordability, the crisis of hope,
Yeah.
and actually speak to your strengths, because just as you ended your introductory comments on the slingshot moment, I've borrowed that expression from you
Great.
multiple times in helping people deal with anxiety about what's going on in our world right now, in our country right now. I have the privilege of working volunteering in a food pantry once a week. And I deal constantly with people who are in crisis, who are scared, who are in some cases angry, but usually it's not anger, it's more just anxiety, confusion, all of those emotions all wrapped up in. And in our particular group of food pantries, 23% more people have been served just in October versus September. The numbers are just going through the roof. Give me a positive message to share with these people, because I'm the outside person. I'm the person that has developed the relationship with these people. These are my friends. These are my neighbors. These are my community. And I see the pain, and it's real, and it's tangible. So give me something. Did I say it was an easy one?
Yeah. So first of all, I didn't even realize this when I called on you before I thought about it, but what a perfect final person to ask a question, because Lynn actually was the first person whose door I knocked on when I was running for state senate in 2019. And we both figured out that we both love A Muppet's Christmas Carol. And then I gave her my number, so every Christmas season, we text one another when we watch our annual Muppets Christmas Carols showings, respectively. So thank you for being the first door that I knocked on, and now the last question of this town hall. And thank you for volunteering, because I think that's part of it. You know, I was just at a manual dining hall on Friday, and almost every month, I talk with, or people on my team talk with folks from the Food Bank of Delaware. And the need is great. It is getting greater. And while it is getting greater, the federal government is pulling the rug out from underneath a lot of people in this moment. Whether it was the intentional choice of cruelty during the shutdown to throw SNAP into chaos, or the big ugly bill, which included the largest cut to SNAP in history. Prices are going up and supports are going away. And so it's a really scary time. And in addition to the slingshot theory, I think for folks who are scared, two things are necessary. The first is we have to bear witness to their pain. And I will just step back, because I think one of the problems in our politics right now is that we are in this fierce competition for pain when there is enough pain to go around. And we validate only some pain. We tend to diminish the pain of people who think and vote differently than we do. Both sides do it. Right? One side says, what do you know about pain? My pain is real. And the other side says, what do you know about pain? My pain is real. And any therapist will tell you that the first step to healing is to have your pain seen and validated. And I think all of us individually and collectively in our politics need to do a better job of recognizing that people don't have to be right for what they're facing to be wrong, and they don't have to be right for us to try to right that wrong. And whether it's individually showing up or in our politics, all of us have to do a better job of seeing people's pain and validating it. The second is we do have to show up. People need to know that they're not alone in this moment. And these nonprofits and volunteering is not going to be able to fill the hole that only the federal government can truly fill, the hole that is being created in part by the federal government in this moment. But it's the least we can do. And it's what we should do in a state of neighbors. And I think what you're doing by showing up and being present and showing them with your own body that they are not alone, it doesn't solve everything, and it won't necessarily be a light bulb moment for them, but it might be just enough for them to continue to persevere and get through the day. And then I just want to step back and close on this, because I know that a lot of times folks see what is going on in the news. They see the recklessness and the violations of the rule of law, the corruption, the risk for our government, our constitution, our democracy in this moment, and they go, how on earth can you talk about affordability? Democracy is crumbling around us. Why are you talking about the price of groceries? And one of the things I know, and I see, and I hear, is that for the vast majority of people who can't make ends meet every single day, they don't have the luxury of caring about everything else. They might not have the time to come to a space like this all the time. They might not be posting on social media about politics all the time, because they are just trying to survive. We owe it to them to solve their problems. One, because that is our responsibility as elected officials. It is the possibility and potential of government to create big solutions for big problems. But on top of that, if you are here and you care about the survival of our democracy, we have to understand that economic opportunity is the foundation upon which freedom flourishes. When I gave my first speech on the floor of the House of Representatives, I thought long and hard about, what do I want to say? What do I want to talk about? And I kept coming back to a speech that had been delivered in that same well in 1944 by Franklin Roosevelt. As World War II raged, Franklin Roosevelt talked about how necessitous people are not free people. When you are hungry and out of a job, those are the things that dictatorships are made of. And all of us in this space, all of us who believe in democracy in this moment, all of us who recognize that this American experiment that started 250 years ago, who realize that that experiment is at risk in this moment, we need to recognize that the only way to save the American experiment is to make the American dream affordable and accessible for everyone. That's why I will continue to focus on it, because my constituents demand it, they need it, but also because of the future of our country requires it. So thank you all very much. It's an honor to be with you today. It's a privilege to be with you in this fight. Thank you so much. Thank you.